Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome to the third session of our Islam study circle. And as we have already outlined, the format which we follow in this session, in this circle, is that initially we discuss something which relates to our practical life and specifically issues of ethics and morality. And in the second part, we generally take up some common misconception regarding Islam. So as far as the first part is concerned, which deals with some of the important behavioral and attitudes that we should adopt, the right mannerisms and the right directions in this regard, the topic that I have chosen today for you is we'll speak about something regarding charity and charitable behavior, because this is something which is of primary importance. If you study the Quran, you'll find out that the Quran has actually encapsulated its directives of the prayer and to give in the path of God and juxtapose them and place them together at a number of times. So it seems that there are two foundations of our religion. The first foundation relates to our relationship with the Almighty, which is through the prayer. And the second foundation of religion relates to our relationship with our fellow beings, and that is through charity and charitable behavior. So let's talk about today regarding charitable behavior and how we as individuals can come up to the mark regarding charity and charitable behavior. So when I say charity and charitable behavior, let me explain a little more. Charity in itself is something which deals or which actually regards some of our spending that we do for the cause of God. And as far as charitable behavior is concerned, it of course does not merely restrict itself to charity, which I mean is spending in cash or in kind, but it actually reflects a behavioral pattern. It reflects an attitude that we need to adopt when we are dealing with our fellow human beings. So if I can give an example, just as we have parents and we have our siblings, so in a very similar manner, we have the Almighty and we have our brethren. So in case of our parents, we are looking up to someone. In a very similar way, in case of God, we are looking up to our Creator. And since He has not only created us, He has also created our brethren, our fellow human beings. So therefore, we have this two-pronged relationship with the divine in the vertical direction and in the horizontal direction with our fellow human beings. So as far as these horizontal direction is concerned, in which we are dealing with our fellow human beings, I'd like to say that the first and foremost thing that we need to understand when we are spending in charity, or when we are, for example, up to the fact that we are facing some calamities in our country, or the fact that there is no calamity, but we have a lot of people around us who might be needing our charitable behavior. So there are some things of caution that we need to be very, very careful of. And I'd like to point them out. First of all, if we are giving something in charity, it has to be understood that we must not show off our charitable behavior. For example, if we are spending some money for the cause of some maybe charitable organization or an individual or any person, it is absolutely against the norms to brag about and to boast about our charity or the charitable behavior which we have adopted. Because you see, the basic purpose of charity is to elevate you spiritually. And this can only be achieved if this spending remains between you and your Almighty. If you start showing off and you start telling other people what you have done or what you achieved in this regard, more often than not, it is counterproductive. Of course, there is an exception in this regard, in which perhaps when we teach our children or our young ones, at times we spend in charity before them, so that they are induced, so that they are encouraged, so they are urged that they too should adopt charitable behavior. So that's like an education. So that's an exception. I'm not talking about that. If we do spend in the cause of God and we would like our children to follow our example, then this is of course something which we should do. But what I'm talking here is about our general behavior, in which whenever we do a good deed, whenever we spend in the path of God, for the cause of God, we end up trying to actually tell people what we have done. We would like ourselves to be noticed. Now, this is something which is very counter, as I said, to the charity spending that we are required to do, because the basic purpose of charity spending is lost. Now, the second pitfall, or the second area in which we should be very careful, is that we must not remind people that we have been charitable to them. Because this often happens that when we have a difference of opinion with people, we remind them at times that in the past we had been spending on you, we had been giving to you a lot of money, for example, and then what we do is that we actually hurt that person. Because if we are hurt by him or her, then we have to place that hurt in its proper context and deal with it, instead of reminding him or her about our past charitable behavior. So the Quran says, "La tubtilu sadaqatikum bil manni wal aza." Don't create this evil portion in your charity by reminding other people of your favors on them and thereby hurting them. So this is the second thing that we must avoid. We must absolutely avoid that. We must never remind our people, to the people to whom we have been charitable. This would be a very mean thing, a very wicked and a very wretched thing. So let's be very fair in this regard, as I said, that we must not remind people of our favors. Thirdly, my dear participants, another important thing is that if we have to refuse someone vis-a-vis charity, then let it be in a very, very congenial way, in a very polite way. We must not scold people. Of course, we know that there are people around us who have taken to beggary, or other people who might not have taken to beggary, but they keep asking us about money, and at times we get irritated because of their repeated demands. But then again, this is an area in which we have to exercise restraint. We must tell ourselves that people who are in bother, people who are in pain, people who are deprived, it is something very difficult for them to contain themselves. So if they ask us repeatedly, at times it is their own compulsion. They cannot do without it. And we should take this particular aspect into account, and we must not scold them. We must not tick them off in this area. We should politely refuse them. At times, of course, our pockets are not in a position to spend on others. So the best thing is to just give a polite refusal and tell them that you can, of course, come back again. And another thing in this particular area I'd like to point out is that at times when our own pockets are empty, what we can do is we can, of course, ask our friends. We can ask other people around us. We can just give a phone call. We can write a WhatsApp message to our acquaintances and ask them that I myself am not in a position to help such and such a person, but if you can help such and such a person, it would be a great thing to do. So it's just not your own self that you should be always aware of. You can always ask your friends, your acquaintances, your immediate surrounding, people who live there, that if they are able to help, because many a time there are people who are waiting to be called upon and they can help you out. It's just a question of we being shy. At times when someone asks me and I have nothing in my pocket, I do shy away. I tend to shy away. Okay, why should I ask for money for someone? But remember, we are not asking for ourselves. We are asking for someone else. At best, we shall be refused. So what? We always have other opportunities. We have a list of friends, don't we? We have a list of acquaintances, don't we? We have so many people to turn to. So just by circulating a message to other people can at times work. And similarly, never underestimate, my dear participants and my dear viewers, the power of dua. At times we are helpless. At times even our friends are helpless to help other people. But the Almighty, the Creator of the heavens and the earth, is never helpless. If we present our petition, if we present our demand before Him and place our demand before Him, we of course are not asking for our own self. We are asking God to help us in acquiring funds, in gaining funds, in trying to gather money for someone else. So these are all the things that we can do in this regard. A person who is geared towards charity is never loses hope. If he does not have anything in his own pocket, he is always trying to wring the pockets of other people. And if that is not working, he is always praying to God to help the person relieve his misery. Now, another thing also that I'd like to point out, which is of course another pitfall, is that at times we shy away if we have a very small amount. For example, there are calamities, there could be areas, there are national calamities, we have floods, we have earthquakes, we have so many things which happen. And in such calamities, there is generally an appeal which organizations, which NGOs make, and even the governments make, But at times, since we have very little in our pocket, maybe a couple of dollars or a couple of rupees, we shy away, thinking that what good are these 10 rupees or $1 or a couple of dollars for this huge cause or for such a huge calamity. So that is the area in which we have to be very careful. Even if we have a penny, even if we have a very small thing, we must not shy away from spending, because our test by the Almighty is to give whatever we are able to give. If at that particular instance we just have a couple of rupees or a couple of dollars or a few pounds, that's what's going to count. And you never know that as you add a drop in the ocean, as you add your own share in the ocean, it grows. And if people start thinking that their small amount will make no difference, then of course that large amount will never be created. These small amounts, these small things, they actually make that amount very large. So this is a very, very important thing. And then viewers, I'd also like to point out that this charitable behavior is something that we should teach our children as well. And the best way to teach our children in this regard is that I think that we should, just as we give pocket money to our children, we give them money for their own expenses. Let us allocate a small portion of that pocket money towards charity, and we tell our children, look here, if we are going to give you so much amount for your own expense, okay, one small part of that amount is to be spent on others. You're not going to spend that amount on your own self. For example, if you're giving a pocket money of, let's say, $100 to your child or $50 to your child, tell him or her that $5 or $10 from this money belongs not to you, but it is given to you for the purpose of spending on others. So again, this is an area in which we have to teach our children, and the best way to teach our children is to give them money to spend on others. That's, I think, an idea in which, if it is adopted by our parents, it can be very beneficial for our youngsters. Then, my dear viewers, also important is the fact that we have to realize that all of us one day will never be in this world. We have to pass away. It's something of a given. We are all destined to die. So let us try to do some charitable works before we die, which can become sadaqah jariyah for us once we pass away. So when we do an act of charity, of course, in our own lives, it's beneficial for us because we have done it for the cause of God. But if we do a charitable act in a way in which that charitable act continues to benefit people even when we pass away and even when we die, then that is what is sadaqah jariyah. And I think this is the best way in which we can continue to reap the benefits of our works and of our deeds. And that's, for example, if we are able to save money to maybe educate people, to maybe contribute in a hospital or in an old home where people are being looked after, or any organization which is working for the welfare of people, if we contribute in that organization, as long as that organization is working and the money that we put in is put to use for other people's charity and their own needs, and even if we pass away, that will become a continuous source of reward even when we die. And that is precisely what is called sadaqah jariyah. So let us also think that we have to become people who not only spend and give in their own lives, but also they become a source of giving even when they pass away. Okay, another thing that I'd like to point out regarding charity and charitable behavior is that at times this charity and this charitable behavior is not possible because we have not saved enough for our own selves. So again, I'd like to give the suggestion that just as we save for a rainy day, just as we save for our children, just as we save for future, for any need of our future, it could be our daughter's wedding, it could be our future needs when we retire. We have so many things for which we save. My suggestion is let us also save some money for charity every month. And the best way is to save some very small amount every day, maybe some half a dollar every day, a dime every day, or if you're talking of rupees, maybe 50 rupees every day, and just put them in a sachet or in a box every day or every second day, and you'll end up with a substantial amount of money at the end of the month. And even if you gather the money, if you collect the money for more than a month, you will be having that money in which you can spend for others. So we need to save for charity as well. Just as we save for our own selves, just as we save for our progeny, for our children, let us save money for charity, which means, of course, that particular money is being saved every day, so that whenever a person comes along, we are not there to refuse him. We have something in our pockets, something stored up for them. And this is something which, of course, will make us very spiritually elevated. Also, my dear participants, and my dear viewers, let us also understand that charity and charitable behavior, as we always know, that famous saying is, charity begins at home. So this charity, first of all, has to go to your nearest people who are living under you. For example, they could be your colleagues, they could be your friends, they could be your relatives, they could be a friend in distress, people who are near you. So as the saying goes, charity begins at home. It means that we have to start charity right from the people who are very close to us, our servants, our attendees, the people who work for us. I live in Pakistan, which is a third world country, and we have servants who work for us. And of course, when servants work for us, at times the salary is not sufficient for them to put all their expenses in use. So they still need extra money. For example, they could have a daughter's wedding in the offing. They could have a child's fee that they need to pay, and they could have a house that they need to build. And there are so many other things, illness, sickness, etc. So if we know someone who is close to us, if we have a driver, if we have a guard, or if he is a friend, any person who is close to us, instead of looking at other charities and looking here and there, the best place to start is right under our nose. People who are closest to us, people who are very near us, they are the people who are the most important recipients and the most significant recipients of our charitable behavior. Also, my dear listeners and my dear viewers, we also need to understand that this charity is an attitude. Giving of charity is an attitude that we need to inculcate in our own selves. The Quran says, "Allazina yunfiquna bil-layli wan-nahari sirran wa alaniya," which means the believers are those who spend day and night for the cause of God, whether they are hidden or whether they are apparent. Their spending is hidden or apparent. So the words "Allazina yunfiquna amwalahum bil-layli wan-nahar," night and day, it does not mean that they spend in night and day. It's like a sentence, and we say that he does this all the time. So night and day actually tells us in Arabic that they are always on the lookout to find people around them who they might help. And in this regard, my dear viewers, I'd like to point out an area in which we might not be very attentive to, and we might be neglecting, and that is people who might be in need and who are very close to us, but they could be this thing which keeps them from begging. It's very difficult to beg to other people. I know that. Of course, all of us know how difficult it is, how hurt we feel, how our ego hurts when we extend our hand to receive money from others. And there are so many people, these white-collar people, say they have such a sense of honor in them that in spite of the fact that they might not be having a meal at night or a breakfast in the morning and many other problems, but they would not ask other people. They'd rather sleep hungry. They'd rather overlook their needs than to ask other people. So this is a very important area that we have to reach out to them. It is we who are obligated to reach out to people who are in need, but because of their sense of honor, they don't ask for charity. And this is a big test for us, because if we, living in a country, living in a society, are not aware of people around us, that person could be our neighbor, that person could be a very close friend. And if we are not aware of his circumstances, if we are not aware of his proclivity in which we know that he's not going to ask for money, then of course this is something of a shortcoming on our part. So we have to look out for such people. Our antennas have to get tuned. Our antennas have to get tuned to such people, to find out such people. Where are they? Of course, they are all around us, but they are not going to come to us. We have to reach them. We have to go to them. So this is an important area that we must always realize, that at times people who are full of honor, full of self-respect, they will not extend their hands, but we have to locate them. We have to find them out. They are in our society. They are very near us, very, very close by. So therefore, let us be very vigilant regarding them. This is of paramount importance. Another area of charity that I'd like to point out here, my dear viewers, is that we have to spend what is pure for the cause of God. The Almighty does not accept money or things which have been obtained by ill-gotten means, from haram means. The Almighty says that only pure wealth will He accept from us. So wealth that we gain from any illegitimate mean, it has no weight before the Almighty. So we have to be careful that we have to earn halal as well, because only halal income and halal things are accepted by the Almighty. And we have to be very careful in them. So this is as far as charity is concerned. Now, my dear participants, I'm just going to say a few words regarding charitable behavior. And before I actually come to this charitable behavior, I'd like to point out one very, very coveted area of charity, something which lies at the pinnacle, at the very top of being a person who is very, very sensitive towards charity. And that is, at times, we have enough money for our own selves, for a particular need. And here comes a person who has a more pressing need, or maybe an equally pressing need as the need that we have. And instead of fulfilling our own need, we need that money that we have saved for us. And when we see a person who has exactly the same need, maybe, or exactly the same amount that we have, so our normal reaction would be that, okay, if I have the money, why should I give it to that person? Because I also need that money. I also have a very pressing need that I have to dispense with. So my natural, normal, or general reaction in general circumstances would be that I'd say, okay, I don't have the money. But you see what the Quran says, and lo and behold, it's something very astounding. It's something so sublime, so out of this world, that one really gets drenched with the love of the Almighty. And that is, the Almighty says that the topmost point of charity, the highest point of charity is, He says in Surah Hashr, يُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ, which means that believers are those people who, in spite of being in need, they give preference to the needs of others. And this is something of an outstanding nature, that we have the amount saved up for our own self. We don't know what will happen if we give away that money. Maybe you have to pay a bill tomorrow or something very important day after tomorrow. But here comes a person who has a similar pressing need. So let me narrate to you a couple of, or just a single example in which, in fact, I have so many experiences which my elders and my colleagues have told me in this regard, that whenever they have attempted to give away what they had for the cause of God, it was such a sublime experience, but that when they gave away their money and they knew that they'll be needing that money the very next day or the day after, somehow something happened and the Almighty reimbursed not only that amount that we gave, but much more. And this is where my elders and my very, I would say, relished and cherished teachers have told me that we cannot see God, of course. We cannot touch God, of course. But here we can experience God. It is here that we can experience God. Because if you spend for others, He comes down and He gives you the money which you had spent and much more. So this is an experience which one has to go through to understand how one will actually feel when this happens. And as the Quran says, this is the pinnacle, that you give in spite of being needy. And when you give for the cause of God, we must remember, as I said, the Almighty never deprives us. It might be a temporary thing, but ultimately, when our need is going to be met, or we need that money for that particular time, much before it, the Almighty will replenish us not only with that, but with much, much more. And this, I think, is a very, 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 very high spiritual experience in which we can experience God, in which we can be motivated by the presence of the Almighty, who we can never see. So this is as far as charity, and I'm going to skip the charitable behavior part because we are running out of time regarding the first session, inshallah, as soon as the break ends, in which you can ask questions about this particular segment. I will next take up some of the misconceptions, but let me just wind up this charity by just saying that before we pass away, we can die any moment. Any person can be called by the Almighty anytime. Let us always try to give for the cause of others, and the best thing that we can give for the cause of others is, for example, what we have. Of course, that is in store, but let us also make a will in which we can donate our organs for humanity. Our eyes, our heart, our kidneys, even stem cells of our skin, our hair, they're all valuable to other people. They're all valuable to other people. So let us make this will that before we pass away, we write a will that whenever we pass away, all our organs, which are of course our charity when we pass away, it's like a sadqa jariya again, the biggest sadqa jariya, in which we donate our eyes. You imagine a person who is blind or who could not see, his eyes would be lit up by the cornea transplant that you are able to donate to him. I think it's one of the most beautiful feelings that a person can experience, in which he can light up the world of a blind person. So let us also write down a will in favor of organ donation, because I think this is one of the very topmost charities that we can do. And again, what we would do, we not even know what's going to happen. It's just a question of telling our heirs and our household people that when we pass away, then please don't become a hindrance in making us donate our organs to other people. So with this note, I come to an end to this first session, and in the next session, inshallah, we'll take up a misconception. But before we do that, if you have any questions regarding this first session, I'll be very happy to answer them. Thank you. Mike Salamji.
And then they have lost their passport or they have lost their purse, and if you can help them. Initially, we thought that they are genuine, so we helped one or two of them. But then, every now and then you will come across these families, either single families, and they will tell you the same story. So what should be our attitude in that case? Because, some they are just trying to, they are not needy, they're trying to get the money. I don't know, like it was just a new norm there. That's how people are asking for money.
So you see, this is a typical case of beggary, which goes on unchecked in most third world countries. And we know people who actually, they make a fool out of ourselves. They would like to gain more out of ourselves. And in such cases, actually, personally, we have to rely on our gut feeling. If we get this gut feeling that the other person is trying to extract money and he is perfectly okay, or maybe he has already done so from many other people and he has come again to us, it's basically the gut feeling that we have. In that particular case, if we think that the person is not doing the right thing, I think we should just politely refuse that person. So instead of scolding him or telling him off, the best way is to just politely say that you cannot give the money to him. And that's the end of that. We don't need to give him a sermon or anything, because, as I said, this is not the time. But the best way to deal with these people is to just politely refuse them. Excuse me.
Parents living with you, and you're taking care of their needs. Does that come under the charity umbrella?
Of course it does. You know what the Quran says? The Quran says, "Kul ma anfaqtum min khairin falil walidain wal aqrabin." It is said in the Quran, when they ask you about where to spend, tell them, O Prophet, "Kul ma anfaqtum min khairin lil walidain." The first thing that you can spend in charity is for your own parents. People think that charity is something of of something of a sort in which we should look down upon. It's a fund in which only the needy are catered for. No, it's not like that. Charity is like spending for our own brethren as well. You know what the Quran has said at another place? It says, "Inna Allah ya'murukum bil adli wal ihsan wa ita'i zil qurba." God enjoins you amongst various things to spend on your kith and your kin, your closest relatives. So when you give something to your father, to your mother, to your sister, to your brother, or to your friends, even if they are not in need, but maybe they could be in need, of course, even then you can give them. But even if you give them something of a gift, maybe, or something which is which they can put to use, then that too is counted as charity. This is what the Quran says, and I think we should rectify our concepts in the light of the Quran, that charity is not something to be looked down upon. It is a very noble deed, and it can be given to our parents as well. The Quran says, "Kul ma anfaqtum min khairin falil walidain." The first thing it sounds regarding the heads of charity is walidain, which are your parents.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Question from Taj Khan. Please unmute your mic and go ahead and ask your question.
Dr. Saab, there are in Islam we all know that there are some mandatory part of charities like zakat, and then there are some sadaqahs. Could you shed some light on those two aspects and those two aspects of charity? And also, I think there has been a common perception in the Muslim community that charity cannot be given to non-Muslims. And could you address that a little bit, please?
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. So the first part of your question is that the mandatory charity or the obligatory charity, of course, is called zakat, and that is something which is the minimum amount that we have to give in the path of God. This is like praying the first zakat of a prayer. So when we pray the first zakat of our prayer, then we are just doing what has been made obligatory or mandatory upon us. Of course, we can go much beyond that by praying nafils and sunnahs. In a similar way, the obligatory part of spending in the way of God, for the cause of God, is called zakat, which of course is levied on your produce, which is levied on your income, which is levied on your savings. That's another area which I'll deal with, inshallah, in some of the later talks, because it needs much more elaboration. But for the moment, it needs to be understood that that obligatory part is a small part. We have to go well beyond that. 2.5% of our wealth, or in some other cases 5% of our income, etc., etc. That forms a very small part of what we can actually spend for the cause of God. Because you see, one thing is infaq, which means spending in the cause of God, and one part of that infaq is zakat, which is a very small part of infaq. So just as a farz zakat of any prayer are the minimum which are the essential part which are required, and over and above them is like becoming a high achiever or achieving more gains. In a similar way, we can go as far as we can in spending for the cause of God. There is no limit to it. Of course, we have to look after our needs, of our children's needs, of our family's needs. But other than that, as much as we can, because as Jesus Christ in one of his Gospels has very rightly said, that what you have spent is actually yours, because that's going to come back to you. So let's be more considerate of the fact that we will spend as much as we can. And as far as the second part of your question is concerned, it is absolutely erroneous to believe that zakat or sadaqat or charity is solely the right of Muslims. There is nothing of this sort in the Quran, and there is a hadith which has been at times wrongly understood, because of which people think that zakat can only be given to Muslims. If you'll say, I'll elaborate on that hadith, but in a nutshell, I can answer your question by saying that as far as charity is concerned, it is not religion specific. It is need specific. If you're Hindu maid, or your Christian maid, or your Jewish maid, or your Buddhist maid, or servant, or any person who you know is in need, then the need has to be catered for. It's the need that's going to decide who is to be given what. It's not the religion that's going to decide, because religion is not going to cause any hindrance as far as any human need is concerned. So that must have to be clarified at the very outset. Excuse me. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. And you said you have two more questions? If they relate to the topic, we can take them now, or if they don't relate to the topic, then we'll take them up at the end. Absolutely, absolutely. You see what? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. So as far as giving zakat to your parents is concerned, what we need to understand is that regardless of the person being a parent, a sibling, or a child, or any other person, if the person is in need, we can give zakat to him. And need is something which is not always defined by the fact that a person himself is paying zakat. Because you see, needs vary from people to people, from strata to strata, people who live in various sections of society. What can be need for me cannot necessarily be a need for you. So if your mother needs something to be paid regarding her medical bill, and in spite of being maybe slightly well off, she's not able to do so, zakat money can be given to her, because you are actually giving something which she herself cannot do so. So this is not the right approach as we generally would see. So zakat can be given to any needy person, including your parents, including your siblings, including your children, as long as that person is in need. And as I said, need is not something to be explicitly defined across the board in a single way. Needs vary from people to people. They vary from people who are very well off, people who are less well off, to people who are poor. Each person has different needs. So we have to decide according to that. And as far as the last question is concerned regarding the cause of God, the cause of God means anything which relates to the welfare of people and for the welfare of the religion of God. So in Arabic, the words used are fi sabilillah. Fi sabilillah means the path of God, the cause of God, and everything which relates to the furtherance of his own religion that he has asked us to follow and practice, and everything which relates to the patronage and furtherance of his creatures relates to the cause of God. So these are the two areas for the brethren for our own brethren, and for everything that we can do for the cause of our religion. Okay. Could you remind me of the question? Okay. As I said, it's a very simple thing. Organ donation has not been touched upon by Islam because it's a matter of ijtihad. In the times of the Prophet, this was not an option. Of course, this has been a recent option. Organ donation has arisen in the last 40 or 50 years. It was never an option in the times of the Prophet. So we don't get any explicit ruling regarding organ donation. But keeping the general spirit of religion in mind, we can clearly see that there is nothing which prohibits it. In fact, it's a very noble act. There are people who are against it, and they think that it is like mutilating the body, or it is like doing khiyana or mistrust in what has been entrusted to you. Again, this is something which is beyond comprehension. We have been given money, we spend for the cause of God. Of course, at times we give our own life, we sacrifice our life to save many other lives. So is that not spending our life for the cause of others? So if we can do it in our own lives, we can even sacrifice our own life in our own life when we're living to save others. How can it be prohibited to save the life or benefit others after we pass away? It makes no sense. Excuse me. So we need to understand that there is no explicit directive which stops us from doing so. They're all man-made and self-made prohibitions which people have come forward with. as far as the Quran and the spirit of the Sharia is concerned, I think it is of utmost importance that we do so. It's a very, very noble act. Yes, we can.
Okay. I'll take Yasin Farad question next.
Okay.
Please unmute your mic and ask directly.
Yeah, I have a question. It's not related to the topic, but when I went for Umrah and we decided to do the second Umrah, there was a question of going to Miqat, and there was some confusion about it. Some people said we can go to Masjid Aisha and do it from there. And we decided to go to Jarana, which is the Miqat for the Taif people. But then later on, people told us that once you are in Mecca, and if you want to do second Umrah, you can just do the Ihram from your hotel. So I was really confused, and I would like to know, if you want to do a second Umrah while you are in Mecca already, what is your Miqat, or do you even need to go to Miqat, or can you just wear the Ihram again from your hotel?
Okay, can I answer this question at the end of the session, because I'm taking questions specifically for the topic that we have covered today. We've noted down your question, and inshallah, once we end this session, we had another question in the very beginning. So we'll take up both these questions when we finish the next part. So I would like...
Okay, no problem.
So should we start our next part?
Please go ahead.
Okay. So the second part of our session, as you all know, deals with some common misconception or some common area which has become a sort of an enigma in the Muslim world, and our younger generation maybe, or even our adults, are at times at loss to find out the correct interpretation, or to be convinced as to what the correct interpretation is. So today I'm going to speak about halal food and the zabiha issue, which is so rampant in the West, of course, and many areas in which the halal food is not available. Of course, all of you know why. You know that the prohibition of halal food. I'm not going to elaborate on that. My area in which I'm going to talk about today is that how can you convince your children, your grown-up children, or people who are around you who could be non-Muslims, who would like to know that why do Muslims abstain from non-halal meat? So, you see, what we need to understand is that it's not mere doing something or not doing something that we should undertake when we study Islam. We must always find out the wisdom behind what we are asked to do and what we are stopped from doing. So, my submission in this regard is that if you have to teach your children or answer a non-Muslim colleague or a friend who might be around you as to why Muslims are so sensitive regarding non-halal food, that they would not eat non-halal food, or maybe your children are ask you this, that why is Islam so adamant, so persistent in a country in which halal food is not, although today I know that it's readily available all over the US, in many other countries as well, but still there are areas in which this is not very commonly available, not generally available. And even if it is available, children do ask that why does Islam insist and emphasize so much on halal food? So I'm going to take up this question and try to explain to you what I have learned from my teachers and from various books which have explained the Quranic directive of slaughtering and of sacrifice, animal sacrifice. So let me start off by saying that, excuse me, I have a very strong bout of cough. So, you see, as far as human life is concerned, you and I and everyone acknowledges that there is not a question, it's out of question that we can take the life of any human being, except of course in certain conditions, and that too by the state authorities. For example, if you've killed a person or you have caused some other harm, then a life for a life is an option only when a person has killed someone, and we ourselves cannot kill any human being ourselves. We have to take our case to the courts, of justice, and they will give this punishment. Apart from that, you see, the sanctity which human life holds is such that we cannot take that life. But that the point that I'm trying to make is that human life is beyond any question that it cannot be taken. Now let's move a step ahead, and that is, according to the Quran, the life of an animal is also sacred. It cannot be taken. Life itself is such a thing that it cannot be taken unless you have permission from God. So in the case of human beings, you had this permission only when he killed someone else. For example, if a person kills someone, only then you have the permission from God to kill that other person in qisas, if that person or his heirs, if that person's heirs do not forgive that person, and certain other conditions as well. In a similar case, in a similar vein, we cannot take the life of an animal as well, unless we are permitted by God. And when we say Bismillah Allahu Akbar, when we slaughter that person, either through a machine or through a knife or through any other means, when we say Bismillah Allahu Akbar, we are actually exercising that permission from God, that we are now allowed to take the life of an animal. I think all of us would have been vegetarians, or most of us would have been vegetarians, if in a normal course of our lives, we would think that why should we take the life of an animal for our own pleasure? Most of us who are sensitive would have sufficed or remain content with eating pulses or vegetable or fish, or maybe not even fish, but certain vegetables. Because why should they take the life of an animal? It is only the Almighty's permission, His behest, that we exercise when we say Bismillah Allahu Akbar, and that is what makes an animal halal. In other words, non-halal animals are animals on which the name of God has not been taken at the time of slaughter. And when that name has not been taken, it actually amounts to the fact that we have not been permitted by God to take that life. So it's like expressing the fact that the life of an animal is also very sacred. It's also very special, just as a human life is. And just in the case of human life, we can only take it if we kill another person. In case of an animal, we can only take that animal's life if we have pronounced Bismillah Allahu Akbar, which is called takbir, and that takbir signifies the permission of God. So I think we need to understand that non-halal meat or non-zabiha meat is not something of a mere directive that has been given by God. It has certain implications. It has wisdom behind it. It has a certain reasoning behind it. And that wisdom and that reasoning is that the life of an animal, we are not authorized to take that life. We cannot take that life unless we pronounce Bismillah Allahu Akbar, because in that case we will be doing something which we have not been permitted to. So when I try to explain this to my students or to people whom I come across who might have a question as to why Islam insists on halal meat, I always give them this example that it's the sanctity of animal life, what to speak of human life. Even animal life is sacred to us unless we say Bismillah Allahu Akbar, because it is in the Quran that the Almighty says that He has created these animals for our consumption. And had I not found verses to this effect in the Quran, I think most of us would have been vegetarians, because being sensitive individuals, we might not have even eaten, because we would be thinking that we are taking the life of an animal for our own pleasure. So it is only the Almighty's permission, which is expressed in the form of that takbir at the time of slaughter, that gives me the courage and gives me the confidence that the Almighty has given me this permission to take the life of that animal and use his meat for my consumption. So I think this is an area in which we need to discuss more, with our children, with our colleagues or other people, because you see, as I always have tried to stress, that to teach religion, our religion is not an amalgam, not a mixture of do's and don'ts. Not merely that. Every do and every don't has a wisdom behind it. If we are asked to pray or go to Hajj, or for example certain other directives, or each directive of Islam has some wisdom, has some purpose behind it. And if we teach our children the purpose behind a directive, I think we will be educating them. We'll be opening up their minds to discussion. We'll be telling them why Islam or why religion wants them to follow a certain routine in life. We will encourage questions from them. And of course, we have to be in a position to answer them as well. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is that as far as slaughtering is concerned, this is the reason behind it. And let us make this a habit of ours, that for each question that we are asked to do something or not do something, we'll try to find out why. Because this why educates us on the reason, on the wisdom of the Almighty. And here this big why is explained by the fact that the Bismillah and Allahu Akbar part, with which we slaughter an animal, is the part which gives us this courage, this confidence, and this permission that we can take the life of an animal. You should not treat taking life to be easy. So, you see, what Islam actually wants to instill in us is the sanctity of life, whether it's human or it's non-human, it's animal life. It says both lives are sanctimonious, both are sacred. The exception is when God tells us that we can take a life of a person when he kills another person, and of course that too by state authorities. And in the case of animals, when we need them for our own consumption, and that too because we have asked God. So I'm just going to end the second part here. It's a short one, and it's meant for your own consumption as well. If you have questions regarding it, I'll be very obliged to answer them. But let us also make this commitment to ourselves that as far as the directives of Islam are concerned, we will teach our children the wisdom behind each directive. We'll educate them behind the wisdom, because that is the way in which they're going to really either adopt that directive or question you further to make them convinced that why should they follow a particular directive. So I'm open to questions on this particular misconception.
Communicate better, because I'm not really sure. Yasin Fahad, the name that displays, you can open your mic and ask your question again, please.
I have a question about the snacks that we have here. The kids are okay with the meat part. I've explained it to them, and they understand the concept. But when it comes to the snacks, like, for example, the ones that have cheese in it, I normally avoid buying them because, the cheese is made with the enzymes that come from the animals. And we don't know if those animals were halal slaughtered or not. So I avoid them. But my kids, they like to eat them. And they always question me, like, why, Mom, why the enzymes also, So I'm kind of not sure how to explain it to them, or if I am right in thinking that even the enzymes that are used to make those cheese products, would they make those snacks not halal for us? So
okay.
Can you help in this respect?
So my answer to you would be that as far as enzymes are concerned, there is no reason to regard them to be prohibited, because you see, these are chemicals which change because of a chemical reaction. And in the first place, they are not even edibles. What we have been directed to refrain from is things that are generally eaten, that is flesh. That is, for example, other parts of an animal's body which are consumed by us. As far as enzymes are concerned, they are chemical elements or chemical things which are found in the stomach or in the intestine or other areas of a animal's body, and they are not generally consumed. They are not generally eaten. They are used for various purposes, and when they are being used for various purposes, their own composition changes because of a chemical reaction. So my particular take in this is that although there are people who stop Muslim brothers or sisters to eat these kinds of things like cheese and butter and many other things, many other dairy products, I personally think that there is no reason why we should stop children from consuming them, because, as I said, Enzymes, in the first place, they are not edibles. They are not edibles. We have been stopped from eating edibles, and edibles is like meat, it is fat, etc., etc. Enzymes in the first place are not edibles, and if someone regards them to be edibles, then the next question is that these edibles, they change their chemical form. They don't remain that they were, like for example gelatin or other things. They change their chemical composition. So I personally think that it's not the right attitude in stopping people in this matter. Of course, absolutely, yeah. I think so. That is my opinion.
It's remaining, and again, I mean, it's up to you if you wanted to continue the class past our scheduled time. But Munazam Malik Sahaba asks, can you please explain why pigs are haram to consume? Thanks.
Right. You see, as far as edibles are concerned, the approach of Islam is that it stops us from edibles which have or animals which are savage in nature, which are beasts in nature, which claw upon other animals. Like for example, they tear them apart and eat their flesh. Because you see, the savagery which is found in animals, if we consume such animals, then that savagery has its effects on our own cells. It is common knowledge, it's scientifically proven knowledge that whatever we eat has an effect on our habits. So what the Quran has said is that only things which are pure and which are not against our human nature should be eaten. And if we study the Quran and Hadith in detail, it comes to the fore. It is highlighted by the fact that things which cause bestiality, savagery and harshness in our behavior are prohibited. And these are basically carnivores, animals which eat meat by tearing them apart. And like, for example, lion, for example, sharks, these are obviously animals which we know. Now, the question which arose regarding a pig or a swine is that, is it a carnivore or is it a herbivore? And is it a meat-eating animal which eats meat and tears apart its prey? Or is it something which eats grass or other vegetation and remains alive? Because we know that as far as these pigs are concerned, they belong to both these categories. They eat grass as well and they eat meat as well. So is it that their carnivorous nature more dominant on their herbivorous nature, or is it the reverse? Because we have distinctions regarding other animals. They are either only herbivorous, they eat grass, for example, rabbits, goat, sheep, and there are absolutely carnivores, for example, as I said, lion and sharks. But there is a middle category in which there are certain animals which are carnivores as well as herbivores. They eat grass and they eat meat at the same time. And it's difficult to decide whether they should be classified as carnivorous or herbivorous. So the Quran has given its verdict that the pig, although it also eats grass, and it's in this manner it's very close to the goat, but its nature, the dominant nature in it is carnivorous, in which it actually eats out its prey as meat. And so that is the reason why the Quran has regarded the pig as prohibited. So in a nutshell, if I just recap, the fact that food always has an effect on our habits is something which we all know. And in this regard, what we have been told is that we must avoid things that produce savagery in us. And savagery is something which is produced by savage beasts by consuming them, especially beasts which are carnivorous. And carnivorous beasts are those which eat the meat of other animals by tearing them apart. And about the pig, since it was also herbivorous and it was also carnivorous at the same time, it was difficult to decide in which category does it fall. So the Quran gave its verdict to us and told us that its carnivorous nature dominates its herbivorous nature, and therefore it also stands in the prohibited category.
Our time is up, but there's two open questions. If you remember, there was a question from Basit Saab in the beginning. That is still open. I had forgotten about it, but he has just written it. And then I have a question from Tosif Saab. If you allow, we can continue.
I think I'll answer both these questions. As far as the first of these questions was concerned, I think if I remember correctly, the question was that if a person keeps on sinning again and again and does the same wrong thing again and again, then what should he do? Is that the question? Was that the question?
I can read it out to you if you like.
Yes, please do.
He says, if a person has wronged much and had abandoned Salah often, but he wants to repent. He does it, but after some time, he becomes basically he stops again, and he leaves good deeds again and keeps repenting and keeps doing it again. Is it obligatory on him to complete all his missed prayers in qaza then, or he should start from repentance moment? The person is knowing that repentance means abandoning. So basically, do you have to cover everything that you've missed previously or not?
Okay, so as far as if the question is specific to the prayer or to namaz, the answer is that there are three views in our ummah which have circulated and found a claim amongst our scholars, because we find nothing from the Prophet himself. We find nothing from the Prophet telling us that if we have not prayed all our lives, maybe, or we have we have missed the major prayers, major part of our life, the prayers that we have missed, how should we make them up? So one point of view in this regard is, which is held by Ibn Hazm, and he says that it's enough that we repent and make tawbah and make ourselves comfortable with the fact that we'll not miss any prayer again. So whatever we have done, we should atone it by simply repenting. The second opinion, for example, is held by, it is said by Ibn Taymiyyah, who says that if we are able to sort of make our prayers in a manner, account them in a manner that the sunnahs that we pray after every farz prayer, we make the intention that these sunnahs and these nafils are actually the missed farz rakats of our previous prayers. So that could be, that's the second view, that we should make the intention, make the niyyah that the sunnah and our farz prayers and our nafil prayers are the ones that we missed out earlier on. And then we have that Hanafite view of certain Hanafi scholars who say that we must count each and every prayer that we missed, and then we should actually try to offer the qaza of each and every prayer. So these are the three views that prevail in our ummah. Each has its own logic, and personally I think that it's up to a person to decide to adopt any of these three views, because there's nothing explicit either in the Quran or in the Sunnah of the Prophet or in any ahadith which tell us what exactly should be the way we adopt. If we are in a position, if we look at the principles of religion in which it has given us ease, then, for example, we can always say that if we have missed a lot of our prayers, for example, if we are in a later age and we have missed, let's say, several thousand prayers, then the Almighty does not compel you to carry out certain things which are beyond your capacity. So the Quran says, "La yukallifullahu nafsan illa wus'aha." So perhaps in that case, the best attitude would be to repent. And for example, if the prayers missed are few in number, not that much in number, again, we can either offer the qaza prayers or make our nafil and sunnah prayers to substitute them. That could be another reason. As I said, that's my personal preference, but each person can have a different preference. So in a nutshell, if the prayers missed are a lot, they account for a very major part, then the only option left for us perhaps is to repent, and that's all. But if they are not much and we are in a position to cover them up, then it would be good if we could cover them up. And I think the last question that remained regarding the Umrah done in the same journey. So let me explain this by saying that the Sahaba and the Prophet Muhammad actually wanted that in one journey only one Umrah should be done. Because you see, visiting the house of God is not something in which we are just trying to offer certain rituals. We have to go through a certain routine. We have to wear the ihram, and the restrictions in the ihram. Then we have to shave off our heads when we put off our ihram. So this has to be done in a very, very immaculate and a very elaborate way. So in this regard, what has been taught to us is that in one journey, we should do only one Umrah. And for example, if we have to do another Umrah for other reason, then the best way is when we go to Medina, whenever we go to Medina or to some other city which is outside the limits of Haram, only then we should re-wear the ihram from that miqat. And I don't think it is the correct way to wear ihram from either Masjid Aisha or from your own hotel, because you're still in the same vicinity. You're still in the same one journey. So it has to be a separate journey undertaken for the purpose of Umrah that you should do an Umrah.
Professor, there is still a question.
Please.
So can I just
Sure.
Can I just clarify, because you answered my question?
Mm-hmm.
So we went to Jurana, which is the miqat for Taif. So was that okay?
Yes,
to do?
that was okay because Taif is another city. That was a better option. But again, as I said, that merely to go to a city to do an Umrah perhaps is not the right thing. You have to undertake Umrah as if you're going for Umrah in the very first place from your own destination. So it could be from any other city. Taif is for example, one other city. Medina is another city. Riyadh is another city. You're coming to Makkah from various other miqats. But as I said, when you're leaving your home, the best way is that you do one Umrah from your home. And only when you go to some other city should you think of doing a second Umrah.
Okay, thank you.
The last question we'll take, inshallah, will be from Tosif Sahab. I have unmuted your mic. Please go ahead and ask your question. Just unmute it yourself as well.
Okay, thank you. Assalamu alaikum. My question on the halal meat is, as I understand, the two requirements are tasmiyah and tazkiyah, right? And as some scholars argue that tasmiyah can be done at the time of eating. So I just wanted to make sure, in your opinion, that cannot be done. It's at the time of slaughter, right?
Absolutely.
And then the second part, the second part is that the kosher meat is halal for us, right?
Right, it is. So tazkiyah and tasmiyah are to be undertaken at the time of slaughter. It has to be done. You see, you are taking when you're eating, you have already taken the life of that animal. So what's the use in pronouncing tasmiyah? Tasmiyah means pronouncing the name of God at the time of slaughter. So you have already taken the life of that animal. So therefore, it is essential that you make sure that tazkiyah has taken place, which means that all the blood has actually spilled out from the veins of that animal. Of course, some of this might be left there. That's a very small amount. And the second thing is that at the time of slaughter, you have taken God's name, not at the time of eating.
All right. Thank you.
Answer your question, Tosif Sahab?
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. We'll meet next week. Just to let everyone know that the system is set up to send you a reminder a day before the class and an hour before the class. You can look at the schedule, which weekends there is no class scheduled because of some public holiday. We have skipped those weekends. However, another way to tell is that you will not get a reminder that week, that weekend when there is no class. Thank you, Dr. Sahab. We'll meet next week.
Okay, thank you. Allah Hafiz.